Hi, I'm Chandler Klebs, and I wanted to record a video explaining, what determinists and incompatibilists about the free will issue you mean when they say something's out of our control. Like, for example, people have a distinction in everyday language, and this is probably because of humans and their belief in free will. People have a statement of saying, well, this is not in your control, but this is in your control. And here's what's interesting about it. I think the confusion that happens stems from the fact that there's certain things we recognize that people don't choose their gender, their skin color, their sexual orientation, their food preferences, where they're born, when they're born, who their parents are, who their grandparents were, all of those things. We know those are all out of our control. People understand that. People agree on that generally, unless you're a Christian and you think that people choose their sexual orientation and that they choose to be gay, because that's something I commonly hear. But aside from those crazy people, most of us generally understand people don't choose when or where they're born, or their biology, or how they're raised by their parents, what they're taught. But then here's what people are missing. Then they say, well, certain things are in our control. They say, oh, well, when you're an adult, you can choose to live your life the way you want. Well, okay. Yes, you might be able to do what you want. Not all of us ever get to the point where we can do what we want. But here's the distinction here. We're not saying that you can't do what you want. We're saying that what you want to do is completely out of your control. So your desires, if you want to eat broccoli, you have a preference for broccoli, that's out of your control. You feel like you're in control because you're doing what you want, but you didn't choose to want it. And so in this sense, everything is out of our control. So does it make sense to have a distinction between the things that are in our control or are out of our control? And this is where I say that it's not a good way to say it, because all of it's really out of our control fundamentally, because we don't choose the things that make us desire to choose what we do. You know what I'm saying? So our choices aren't our choice. So that's what the free will debate is about, and that's why free will, the idea of self-creation, is completely incoherent. Here's what I would say, though. It comes to a distinction about that which can be changed and that which cannot be changed. So we're not saying that people can't change their beliefs or change their actions to be different in the future than they were in the past. But even when they do change their actions or beliefs, that's also out of their control. I mean, it's very powerful to understand this. Everything is really outside of our control. But then there's, these terms about things being in our control or not. We have, a TV or a video game system has a controller. Or let's say you're playing Magic the Gathering, which I was doing. I was playing Magic Duels on Steam, and and so there are things like, when this creature comes under your control and weird stuff like that. It's like there's this idea that you're the one in control if it's you who says what happens or what doesn't happen. But what's interesting about that is that means that, yes, you can apply the idea of control to things that are non-living, even things that are unconscious. You can say gravity is in control because it keeps us bound to the earth and we don't float away. You can say the clouds are in control of where the sunlight reaches and where it doesn't. So in the loose sense of control, yes, everything is in control because everything acts upon other things, but ironically, humans have no more choice in what they do than gravity, than clouds, than the sun, than the moon. These things, if they did choose to be a different way, Well, what would cause it to choose to be a different way? And then it's not it choosing because it's something else causing it. So let's just say that, let's say there was a God, okay? And let's say that somebody prayed and asked God to make gravity disappear. And so there was no gravity in the universe anymore. So let's say there was a God that could do that, that could take away gravity. Well, gravity didn't choose to do that. God didn't choose to do that because God was doing what the human told God to do. So you see, here's the interesting thing is, take for example, well, that brings up another thing, like the fact that prayer is often a thing about humans telling God what they want. And so this is interesting. So humans believe that they're controlling God by their prayers. You know, that's an interesting thought. But yeah, this is interesting because the very concept of being in control is an impossible idea because you can't do anything unless something first gives you the thought to do something. So it's kind of a weird thing. So this leads to the very interesting idea that, of course, everything is caused, you know. Or some people say there's randomness, there's true randomness, that uncaused events happen, which doesn't grant us any more control. But, you know, this is cool. This is cool to think about. So, yeah, I'm just saying, you know, we need to really get down to the business of what it means to be in control or out of control, because we don't control ourselves. We're controlled by other people who aren't in control of themselves, who are controlled by other people. And even if you had only one human who was alive on the planet, and say that there were no other animals or other humans, well, they're still controlled by the weather. They're controlled by how hot or cold it is. They're controlled by their hunger, which forces them to eat. So it's a weird thing. I mean, nothing is in our control. And that's what it's all about. It's a weird feeling. It's a feeling like, well, what will I do today? I don't have any clue. It's absolutely true that I don't really have a clue what I'll be doing. I know I'll be working at Hy-Vee today. But do I know what I'll be doing? No. Because that's whatever the managers tell me to do, whatever the customers tell me to do, whatever the cashiers tell me to do. And you know what I'm saying? That's just an example about, hey, we don't know. That's like knowing how a chess game will turn out before you've played it. You don't know what your opponent's going to choose, but neither do they, because that's depending on what you choose. And even people say, well, you can choose whether or not you play the game. Based on what? Based on whether you want to play chess or not. You either do want to play chess or you do not want to play chess. It's already predetermined whether you will or will not play chess. I mean, so everything's predetermined, but because we don't know it, we feel like we're in control because we think that we could really either do this or that. And so it's an interesting thought. I mean, this whole idea of being in control is, it's very interesting, this idea that anyone can ever really be in control. And what does it all mean? But yeah, it's a serious thing, and that's why the free will debate is just so huge, and that's why I've been, you know, producing the Free Will Science and Religion podcast along with my co-hosts, and why I participate in George's show, Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. Eventually, we're probably going to get back to doing more episodes of that. But yeah, it's really cool, just this realization that nobody's really in control of what they do, but we still are able to achieve the results we want. So sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, which largely depends on how much money you have, what other people will let you do, what the laws in your country are. So first of all, we don't control whether or not we live in a society or if we're in a situation that lets us do what we want. So we neither choose our desires, nor do we choose whether or not we're in a situation that lets us act on those desires. So the longer I think about it, the more I'm beginning to see that no, we have less control than ever thought, ever before. And I'm realizing every day how we really aren't in any type of control at all. And it's a very interesting thought because people fear that if no one's in control, no one has any choice, then that determinism or incompatibilism means that we should release all the criminals from jail because they didn't choose to do their crimes. But that's irrelevant because, see, the reason people go to jail or are separated is because, the rest of society doesn't want them to keep doing things, so they try to stop them. But you know what? Sometimes, even under a free will-based system, people go to jail who didn't actually commit a crime. They were framed. Sometimes people did do a crime, but they're released from jail after so many years, and then sometimes they might go out to do the same crime again if their psychology hasn't changed during that time they were in jail. So there's still problems to work out, even under a free will-based system, but it's important to understand that yes, sometimes people have to be stopped, sometimes have to put in jail, and you can even argue that there's times where people have to be killed. But you can do it without the hatred and realize, well, they didn't choose to be what they are any more than you choose to be a person who didn't like what they were doing. So there's all this compassion and understanding that comes from this understanding of no free will. And that's why I do what I do. That's my biggest focus right now is on the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast and promoting this message that we don't have a free will, because it's just so important.